So does eating nuts cause weight gain? Yes and no. So in this video, I'm going to share with you some different reasons why you might find yourself either gaining weight from eating too many nuts or thinking you've gained weight from eating nuts. The reason I say thinking that you've gained weight from eating nuts is because nuts are actually quite inflammatory for a lot of people. And when you eat something that's inflammatory, what it does is it causes you to hold on to water. And when you hold on to water, it makes you feel puffy. And that puffiness is going to give you the feeling of having gained weight, even if you haven't. So the first thing to know is that there's a couple different kinds of nuts that tend to be more inflammatory. And those two are peanuts and cashews. So if you find yourself gaining weight when you eat peanuts or peanut butter or cashew butter or like cashew cheeses, etc., you might be one of the people that doesn't do that well with those types of nuts because they have different properties in them that make them inflammatory. So peanut butter is known for having a type of mold in it that will cause inflammation in people, as well as cashews have a lot of lectins, which can cause inflammation. So both of those things can basically make you feel puffy after you eat them. And if you continue to eat them too long, that ongoing inflammation that it's causing will make your body resistant to losing weight. There's another aspect to eating nuts that most people don't realize. It might be obvious that they could cause weight gain because they're high in fat, but it's actually the fat part of it is not the cause of why people will gain weight. It's actually the combination of fat and carbohydrate together. So most people think that fat makes you fat, but actually sugar makes you fat. And carbohydrates, when they're digested in your body, they break down into sugar. So pretty much anything that you eat that's a carbohydrate, whether it's natural or processed, is still going to be ending up being glucose, which is a sugar in your body. So whether that sugar is refined or not, it's still going to cause weight gain if you have more than your body has the ability to tolerate or store for later in your muscles. The body has no choice but to store it as fat if we don't have muscle mass that can store it so that we can use it later. That's what our muscles do. They actually store carbohydrate. And that's why people often notice that as they age, they can't tolerate the foods that they used to eat and still stayed nice and slim. But then as they get older, those same foods make them put on weight. So part of it is this growing carb intolerance that people have as they age that causes them to gain weight when they eat nuts. So nuts will actually be one of those things that can cause you to gain weight because not just because of the fat or just because of the carbs, but because they're high in fat and carbs together. Now your body is going to use fat and carbs for energy. And if you have too many energy sources coming in at the same time, then one of them is not going to be able to be used. If you have two energy sources that are really high in energy coming in at the same time, but you're not an athlete and you're a couch potato, or you have insulin resistance, which most people don't realize that they have to some degree, especially as we age, it's something that is very common as people lose their muscle mass, then even healthy whole foods will cause weight gain because of the carbohydrate content that is in them. But in the case of nuts, we've got the carbohydrate and we have the fat together. So now we have two sources of energy to contend with. If you're not athletic and doing a lot of exercise, or if you are losing your muscle mass, then you're not going to be able to eat a lot of nuts without weight gain. So most people know that nuts have fat in them, but not that many people understand that they're actually high in carbohydrates. And so if you don't want to gain weight, then the worst thing you could do is combine something that's high fat and high carb together. You kind of have to pick your energy source, whether you're going to eat higher in fat and lower in carbohydrate, or high in carbohydrate and lower in fat. I don't recommend eating high in carbohydrate and lower in fat. Diet that's higher in fat is higher in protein and really important vitamins and minerals. So it's probably better across the board unless you're doing a cleanse, for most people to eat less carbohydrate and more fat for energy, and of course getting your protein right. And it's much easier to get your protein right with animal foods. Okay, so let's look at these nuts, and that we've now realized are both high in fat and in carbs, which makes them something that is could have a tendency to cause weight gain. So I just have my trusty little notes here. So when we are looking at the first two that we want to avoid is peanut butter and cashew, because those are across the board the most often inflammatory for people. And let's look at the amount of sugar that's in them. So I've calculated everything to be about a half a cup of nuts. Okay, so a half a cup of cashews has 22 grams of carbohydrate in it, which is pretty much the same as like your average chocolate bar has about 20 or grams of carbohydrate. Okay, so having 22 grams of carbohydrate, if you divide that by 4, it gives you the amount of sugar that carbohydrate breaks down into. So when you eat half a cup of cashews, you're not just getting the fats that are in the cashews, but you're also getting the sugar. So half a cup of cashews is going to give you about 5.5 teaspoons of sugar. Okay, so if you don't plan to run a marathon, if you're not an athlete, you're not a bodybuilder, then you probably can't eat a half a cup of cashews without weight gain, because there's fat in that. They're high fat and high in carbohydrate. Now, peanuts are not nearly as high in sugar or carbohydrate as cashews. So a peanut, when you eat a half a cup of peanut, you end up with 8 teaspoons of, 8 carbs, which results in 2 teaspoons of sugar. So to some degree, you're going to be able to get away with that. It's in like a lot of keto foods. It's kind of considered a keto food because of its fat to carbohydrate ratio. But because it's so inflammatory, it's probably not something that you should eat on a regular basis if you're trying to lose weight or heal your body. Basically, everything that I'm sharing with you in this video about nuts, you're gonna be able to apply it to any health condition, because it's not just about weight loss, but inflammation in general is a part of every single disease practically that exists out there. So this information is important to consider if you're experiencing any inflammation in your body. So let's look at everything. I'm going to tell you everything that's above 2 teaspoons of sugar when you eat a half a cup of it. So peanuts, almonds are about 2.25 teaspoons of sugar when you eat a half a cup of them. And you'll notice that a lot of baking that is like gluten-free or grain-free has a lot of almond flour in it. So that can really add up. So a lot of times when people go from being on a diet with grains and gluten and they switch to gluten-free grains and all these alternative flours, they don't realize that those are way higher in carbohydrate than wheat. And so people's carbohydrate can go up super high, which may initially give some relief to the gut, but then because it's inflammatory, the results are short-lived in the sense of that the body becomes inflamed now from these new flours that are super high in carb. So you kind of have to be careful there. Okay, so pine nuts are the same as almond. They, when they're digested, they're about 2.25 teaspoons of sugar when they're digested. And pistachios are 15 grams of carbs per half a cup, and that is equal to 4 teaspoons of sugar. So it's quite interesting because you'll notice that the most popular nuts are the high carb nuts, because we're humans and we like things that are sweet. Even though we don't think of these things as sweet, they are sweet. So we can actually be addicted to foods that are like not sweet to the taste, because they're actually giving us that like a sugar hit, the way other things that are actually sweet would give us sugar hits as well. Okay, so now let's go down to ones that are more reasonable. So hazelnut and walnut, they are 1 3/4 teaspoons of sugar. But that's close to 2 teaspoons, which is the same as peanut butter. So actually, if you're trying to lose weight, even though they're not super high in sugar, they're probably not the best to be using in large amounts. And of course, if you just took everything down to a 1/4 cup, you would be half of these amounts, right? So that would be really, really great for some of these. Like having a 1/4 cup of walnuts a day is going to be not that much. It's going to be like 1 teaspoon of sugar. But if you have a whole half a cup, which is easy to do once you just start like eating trail mixes and stuff like that, right? It's one thing if you just take a 1/4 cup of nuts and like sprinkle it on your breakfast or sprinkle it on, a meal. That's not that much. It's when you are like eating handfuls of it all day. Okay, so the best nuts to eat for losing weight, because they are lower in carbohydrate, is Brazil nuts, pecans, and macadamia nuts. So Brazil nuts and pecans have 4 grams of carbs, which means they just have 1 teaspoon of sugar in them. And macadamia nuts has 5 grams of carbs, so it's 1 1/4 teaspoon of sugar. So if you are right now actively trying to lose weight, or you're struggling with any kind of inflammation, the best 3 nuts to have are these lower carbohydrate nuts. Also macadamia nuts, because they don't have that skin on the outside of them, they are actually better for people when you have gut issues, because they don't aggravate the gut the same way. Which brings me to my final point of how nuts can cause weight gain. So all nuts are basically the seeds of plants, right? So they have something around them, a coating called phytic acid, that is inflammatory and prevents the body from being able to really access the nutrition that well. So in order to get the best value from these nuts, the best way to do that is to soak them. If you soak your nuts overnight and then get rid of the water the next day, like rinse them off, and then take those same nuts, lay them out on a cookie tray, and then put them in the oven on the lowest temperature until they dehydrate again. Now you're going to get nuts that have bioavailable nutrition. So you're going to get more nutrition out of the nuts than you could if you ate them raw. And you're also going to have the benefit of the phytic acid being removed, so they're going to be less inflammatory. So you're going to take the best nuts for weight loss and apply this process to them, but not macadamia nuts. We'll talk about that in a sec. You could do this with the Brazil nuts and with the pecans. And then if you want to go up a little bit, you can use also the walnuts. Then you're going to be able to get optimal nutrition from those nuts without the phytic acid, which makes them less inflammatory. Now, typically you don't, again, have to do this with the macadamia nuts. They typically don't have a high inflammatory or allergic factor to them, and they're so high in fat that they're not really going to absorb water the way the other nuts are. This whole method that I told you is called making crispy nuts. I've never actually tried that with macadamia nuts. My favorite way to have macadamia nuts is cold out of the freezer. They are so delicious. But recently I bought some macadamia nut butter and did the same thing with it. Had it like the nut butter out of the freezer. And I found that I wanted to eat it. I didn't want to stop eating it. It was just so luxuriously delicious that I found that I couldn't stop myself. And so the first day that I did that, the next morning when I woke up, I did actually notice that I had some my eyes looked a little bit, what's the word? A little bit swollen, just a little swelling I could see under my eye. And I know it was from eating too many macadamia nuts in the form of nut butter. Which just goes to say at the end of the day, it's really about how your body reacts to what you're eating. And, I gave you some parameters that you can use and now you have more knowledge about all the different ways that all the different ways that nuts in particular could be pushing you more towards weight gain or inflammation, and ways to help mitigate that. But at the end of the day, we're all unique individuals, so you're gonna have to experiment with it. So start watching for the effects. So if you eat these foods, but the next day your hands are swollen, or you're like I felt in my face, my face was puffy, under my eyes, then that's telling you that either that's not the right food for you, or you just ate too much of it, then it went into an inflammatory, like it pushed your body into an inflammatory state. So a lot of people will tell you when you do these, tests to see how your body reacts to food, is if you have a reaction to it, like you should never eat it again. I don't look at it that way. I look at it like, find out how much is okay for you and how much is not okay for you. And then only eat the small amount that's enough that your body can actually digest well. Because every time we start eliminating foods from our diet, we're actually like pushing away our access to nourishment. So if I have a quarter cup of macadamia nuts and I feel good and I have no negative effects from that, well, then I'm going to keep having that. But if I have half a cup and I notice that causes a problem for me, then I'm going to stop. But I'm going to be honest with you, I probably had a cup of nut butter that day. So I really overdid it. Like, yeah, I'm not kidding you. It was so delicious. It was like velvet out of my freezer. So I'm like, just like anyone else, I lost a whole bunch of weight, many, many years ago, and I've kept it off, but I still have, these little things that come up where I have to just kind of like reel myself in, because we're all human, right? This is an example of it. Peanut butter is another thing for me. Like I cannot even have it in the house. I find I can have these foods in the house in their like whole form, like a whole peanut or like a whole macadamia nut or whatever. And I'm not going to feel like I want to binge eat it. But for some reason, once it's a nut butter, I have no control. So I just can't bring it into the house. And so I haven't brought peanut butter in for a long time, because like I think it was like 4 months ago, I went through this like binging on peanut butter thing. And then like, I was like, okay, I can't bring peanut butter into the house. So literally it was just this week, I was like, oh, I'll just bring the macadamia nut butter. That's going to be no big deal. Yeah, maybe it's just me. I have a thing for nut butters. So find your sweet spot, and, don't say no to eating nuts, but just find the right amount that works for you, and try some of these suggestions about which ones to prioritize, which ones to avoid, and this method of making crispy nuts in your oven so that you can get the most nutrition out of nuts possible with the least amount of anti-nutrients like phytic acid, and prioritizing the ones that are going to be a match to your health goals.